The discovery of the forgotten fleet. The vastness of space was silent, as always. Stars twinkled in the distance, but the asteroid field before them was a graveyard, cold, dark, and abandoned. The Xilari exploration crew, a group of elite alien archaeologists, had been scanning the region for weeks. Their leader, Commander Vextal, sighed in disappointment as he observed the endless floating debris from his ship's control room. "We came all this way for nothing," grumbled Sarnak, his second in command. "Another dead system. Another useless mission." Commander Vextal narrowed his reptilian eyes. "Patience, Sarnak. The Council believes there is something here. We must keep looking." Their ship, the Celestial Eye, sent out powerful scanning waves, searching through the asteroid belt. For a long time, the monitors showed nothing but rock and dust. But then, something changed. Beep, beep, beep. The ship's scanners detected metal structures, large and unmoving, buried deep within the asteroid cluster. The screen showed strange, rusted ships, their massive hulls hidden beneath layers of rock and debris. Vextal's heart raced. "This is it. We found something." The Celestial Eye carefully maneuvered through the asteroid belt. As they approached, the shadows cleared, revealing a massive fleet of ancient warships. The ships were colossal, far larger than anything in the Galactic Council's fleet. Their dark, metallic hulls looked scared by time, but they remained intact, silent giants floating in the void. The Xilari team was in shock. "There must be hundreds of them," whispered Sarnak, his voice barely above a breath. "This technology is ancient," another crew member muttered. "These ships, they shouldn't even exist anymore." The fleet looked primitive to the aliens. The design was unlike anything in modern galactic history. There were no sleek curves, no plasma reactors, no fusion cores. The engines looked bulky and outdated, and the weapons were covered in layers of space dust. Sarnak smirked. "These are nothing but floating wrecks. The Council will laugh when they hear about this." But standing at the back of the observation deck was Dr. Ilias Carter, the only human in the crew. Unlike the others, he wasn't laughing. His hands clenched into fists, his eyes wide with shock. Because he recognized them. The shape of the hulls, the structure of the weapons, the markings etched onto the sides. These weren't just random ancient ships. They were human. Elias took a step forward, his breath shaky. No, this can't be right." Commander Vextal turned to him, raising a scaly brow. "Something wrong, human." Elias swallowed hard, his voice barely steady. "These ships, they were built by us, by humans." Silence filled the control room. Then the aliens burst into laughter. "Impossible," Sarnak scoffed. "Humans are a young species. These ships are thousands of years old." Elias ignored the mockery. He knew what he was seeing. These ships belonged to the first great fleet of Earth, a fleet that had vanished from human history. Every historian knew the story. Earth's earliest space expansion efforts had led to the creation of a massive war fleet. But then, one day, the fleet disappeared. No one knew why. No records explained it. But now, here it was. Dr. Elias stepped closer to the screen, running his fingers over the glass. This fleet, it was never lost. It was hidden. Commander Vextal frowned. "Even if these ships are human, what does it matter? They are ruined, Dr. Carter. Dead metal, a relic of the past." Elias wasn't so sure. Something about the ships felt wrong, or perhaps too right. They weren't broken. They weren't destroyed. They were waiting. He turned sharply to the commander. "We need to leave. Now." The alien scoffed again. "Oh, please," Sarnak sneered. "Do you think these rusted toys are a threat?" Suddenly, the lights flickered. A deep hum echoed through the asteroid field. The once lifeless ships began to glow faintly, a dull red light flickering within the warships. The Celestial Eye's monitors went crazy. Systems malfunctioned. Warning signs flashed across the screens. "What's happening?" an auxiliary technician yelled. Then, a low, mechanical voice boomed through the ship's speakers. "Human DNA DTECTD. Systems REACTIV. Elias's heart stopped. The fleet wasn't dead. It had been asleep. And now, it was waking up. The hidden power awakens. The control room of the Celestial Eye was in complete chaos. Warning alarms screamed through the ship, red lights flashing wildly across the consoles. The monitors flickered, unable to process the massive energy spike emanating from the ancient fleet. Commander Vextal slammed his clawed hand on the control panel. "Report. What's happening?" One of the auxiliary technicians, his voice trembling, stuttered. "Yes, sir. The fleet. It's activating." Dr. Elias Carter stood frozen, his eyes locked on the screen displaying the giant warships, their once dead hulls now pulsating with a deep red glow. It was impossible. These ships had been floating here for thousands of years. They were supposed to be dead relics, abandoned and powerless. But now, they were coming back to life. A low, mechanical rumble vibrated through the asteroid belt. The ships weren't just powering up. They were awakening. Elias turned sharply. "We need to leave now." Sarnak, the auxiliary second in command, let out a dry laugh. "Leave? Over what?" "Some flickering lights. Look at them, human." He gestured toward the ancient warships. "They are old, rusted, barely holding together. This is nothing but a..." Before he could finish, a deep sound tore through space. A noise so powerful, so unnatural, that it sent shivers down everyone's spine. It was a voice made of metal, echoes, and something almost alive. "Primary directive restored. Systems REACTIV. The warships, one by one, began to move. Slowly, like giants rising from their slumber, they shifted in the vacuum of space. Their long-dormant thrusters ignited, burning with a strange blue fire that no one in the Galactic Council had ever seen before. Energy shields flickered around their hulls, reforming into perfectly intact barriers. They weren't broken at all. They had been waiting for a command. Elias grabbed the nearest console, trying to steady his breathing. His mind raced. "This fleet," he whispered, "it was never destroyed. It was hidden, buried, put into stasis." Vextal clenched his jaw. "You mean, they were meant to wake up someday?" Before Elias could respond, the monitors screamed again. Another warning. Another shockwave. This time, it wasn't coming from the fleet. It was coming from the Galactic Council's warships. The auxiliary were not the only ones monitoring this discovery. The Council's security forces, led by the warlord Admiral Krelzan, had just entered the system, and they had come armed. A transmission crackled through the Celestial Eye speakers. "This is Admiral Krelzan of the Galactic High Fleet. You have trespassed on a restricted site. Disengage immediately or face consequences." Vextel's throat tightened. Restricted site. The Council never claimed this sector. Boom. A sudden explosion shook the asteroid field. One of the Council's warships had fired a warning shot. The blast barely missed, but it sent shockwaves across the battlefield. Elias's eyes widened. "They're trying to destroy the fleet." Admiral Krelzan's voice came through again. "You do not understand what you have awakened. These ships are a danger to the entire galaxy. They must be eliminated before it's too late." Sarnak smirked. "See, human, even the Council knows this fleet is nothing but a threat." But Elias wasn't listening. His focus was on the fleet's command systems, their lights flashing in rhythmic patterns, as if communicating. Then the voice returned. "Unknown host ILLEs, DTHCTED. The Council's ships charged their weapons. Defense Pturo Tokyo LNJGT." Elias's heart nearly stopped. Oh, no. The fleet wasn't just waking up. It was preparing for war. The ancient warships, once thought to be dead, suddenly turned their massive cannons toward the Galactic Council's fleet. Vextal's eyes widened in horror. They're locking on to the Council ships. Sarnak laughed. Let's see how well your precious human relics do against modern weaponry. Then, the first attack came. The Council's warships unleashed plasma torpedoes, sending bright green energy projectiles toward the ancient fleet. The Silari watched with glee, expecting the rusted old ships to be blown apart instantly. But the moment the plasma torpedoes got close, they vanished. The Council forces barely had time to react before the ancient warships returned fire. Their weapons, long silent, roared to life. Elias and the rest of the crew watched in shock as massive energy beams erupted from the old warships. Unlike modern plasma cannons, these weapons didn't just explode on impact. They ripped straight through the Council's shields like paper. Boom, boom, boom. 3 Council warships exploded instantly, torn apart by technology they didn't even understand. The fleet had been sleeping for centuries. But now, it was awake. And it was angry. Admiral Krelzan's voice returned, this time, panicked. All ships retreat. Retreat. But it was too late. The forgotten fleet, the one they had all laughed at, was proving to be the most advanced and deadly force the galaxy had ever seen. And Elias knew one thing for certain. This is only the beginning. The legacy of the ancestors. The battlefield was no longer silent. The void of space trembled as the ancient warships unleashed their wrath upon the Galactic Council's fleet. Massive beams of energy carved through the Council's warships like a hot knife through butter. Explosions bloomed across the darkness as ship after ship was reduced to scattered debris. Admiral Krelzan had never seen anything like this. His most advanced warships, equipped with state-of-the-art shielding, were being annihilated effortlessly. The enemy's technology, thousands of years old, was superior. How was this possible? All units retreat. The Admiral roared, his voice shaking with disbelief. Do not engage. I repeat. Do not engage. But it was too late. The ancient fleet had awakened completely. From the Celestial Eye's observation deck, Dr. Elias Carter stood frozen, watching in horror and awe as his ancestors' forgotten war machines tore through the Council's forces like a predator shredding its prey. Commander Vextal, his reptilian eyes wide with shock, turned toward Elias. How is this possible? This technology should be obsolete. These ships were built in the past, yet they are stronger than our most advanced weapons. Elias, breathing heavily, finally understood. This isn't normal human technology, he murmured. This is something beyond. Sarnak, still arrogant despite the chaos, sneered. You speak as if humans were ever capable of something like this. Elias ignored him. His hand shook as he tapped feverishly on his tablet, analyzing the data coming in. The fleet wasn't just active, it was learning. Every shot fired by the enemy was being analyzed and countered instantly. The ships moved as one, a hive mind of war, shifting in perfect synchronization. Their weapons predicted enemy movement before they even reacted. This wasn't human technology as he knew it. It was something more. The forgotten truth. Elias's fingers moved across his screen, scanning deeper into the warship's systems. There had to be records. There had to be logs. If this fleet was built by humans, who built it? Why? And where did they go? Then he found it. A name. A long-forgotten name. Vanguard Fleet, the final legacy of humanity's first age. Elias's breath hitched. His heart pounded. Vextal noticed his reaction. What is it? Elias slowly lifted his head. These ships, he whispered, weren't just part of an old war. They were supposed to be humanity's greatest defense. Vextal frowned. Defense against what? Elias scrolled through the recovered files. The text was old, filled with cryptic logs. But one message, buried deep in the records, made his blood run cold. It read, "If you are reading this, then we are already gone." His heart pounded. The message was ancient, written in a dialect of English that hadn't been used for centuries. Another line followed. "The war we feared was never fought. The enemy never came. But we knew, someday, something would. And when that day arrives, our legacy will awaken." Elias's hands trembled. "This fleet wasn't abandoned," he whispered. "It was hidden. It was meant to wake up only when humanity was in danger." Vextal stared at him, but humanity wasn't in danger. Elias swallowed hard. "Then why are they awake?" Silence filled the control room. The only sounds were the alarms, the distant booms of council ships exploding, and the horrifying realization sinking in. If the fleet had awoken now, then something was coming. The last warning. Sarnak, still unconvinced, scoffed. "Enough with your fairy tales, human. What matters now is that these ships belong to the Galactic Council. We must." Boom. The ship lurched violently, throwing everyone off balance. Sparks erupted from the control panels as the power fluctuated. "What the hell was that?" Elias shouted. One of the auxiliary technicians, his face pale, checked the monitors. His voice trembled. "Something just scanned us." Vextal whipped his head around. "Scanned us? By who?" "The Council." The technician shook his head. "No, sir. It came from outside the system." Elias felt his stomach drop. Outside the system. That meant incoming transmission. Another officer shouted. A distorted alien voice crackled through the speakers. "Unregistered human warships detected. Fleet designation. Vanguard. Priority target. Eliminate." Elias's breath stopped. "Who the hell is that?" Sarnak barked. The technician's hands shook as he zoomed in on the scanners. His eyes went wide with horror. "Sir, we have an unknown fleet approaching. Hundreds of warships." Vextal paled. "Council reinforcements." The technician slowly shook his head. "No, this isn't the Council. It's something else." Elias, his blood running ice cold, read the last line of the ancient message again. "If they wake up, it means the war has begun." He turned to Vextal, his voice barely a whisper. "It's not the Council. It's the enemy the fleet was built to fight." Silence fell upon the control room. Then, in the distance, far beyond the asteroid belt, a dark mass began to emerge from hyperspace, a fleet unlike anything they had ever seen. Their true enemy had arrived, and humanity's forgotten warriors were ready for battle. The first strike. The celestial eye trembled as the warning sirens blared. The bridge crews scrambled to stabilize the ship, but their movements were stiff, frozen in pure terror, as the scanners displayed something none of them had ever seen before. A fleet of unknown warships had just emerged from hyperspace. Their black, jagged hulls reflected no light. Their shapes were unnatural, their designs unlike any known species in the galaxy. Elias's pulse pounded in his ears. The true enemy had arrived. The unknown threat. Commander Vextal turned toward his officers, his reptilian face pale. "How many ships?" The technician's hands shook as he counted. "At least 200. No, 300. And more keep arriving." Vextal's throat tightened. "Weapons." The technician gulped. "Unknown, but their energy signatures air." He hesitated. Elias stepped forward. "They're what?" The technician looked up, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're stronger than anything we've ever recorded." The control room went dead silent. Outside, in the vast darkness of space, the ancient fleet remained motionless, watching, waiting. The Council's remaining warships had stopped firing. Even Admiral Krelzan, who had moments ago been hell-bent on destroying the human fleet, had gone quiet. For the first time in his career, he felt fear. A transmission crackled through the comms. The voice was inhuman, distorted, layered, something not meant to be heard by mortals. Primary objective: destruction of the human vanguard fleet. Elias's stomach dropped. They weren't here for the Galactic Council. They weren't here for the Xilari. They were here for the forgotten human fleet. Because they knew what it was. They had been waiting for it to awaken. The first attack. Then, without warning, the first enemy warship fired. A massive pulse of black energy erupted from its hull. The blast moved faster than light, warping space as it traveled straight toward the ancient human fleet. Vextel gritted his teeth. There's no way they can react in time. But before the energy blast could hit, something impossible happened. The ancient fleet moved. Not just one or two ships, all of them. At the same exact moment. As if they had one mind. The human warships shifted formation instantly, adjusting their shields in perfect unison. The black energy blast collided, but instead of causing an explosion, it simply disappeared. Sarnak gasped. What? What just happened? Elias's heart pounded. They absorbed it. Vextal turned to him. What do you mean? Elias's voice was shaky. They didn't block the shot. They studied it. The realization was chilling. The ancient human fleet was not just fighting. It was learning. The counterattack. For a few moments, the battlefield was silent. Then the ancient fleet fired back. Bright golden beams of pure energy surged from their cannons, traveling at speeds that defied logic. Unlike the enemy's weapons, these blasts did not explode on impact. Instead, they pierced straight through the black warships, tearing them apart molecule by molecule. Half of the enemy's front line was vaporized instantly. A ripple of realization spread across the battlefield. This was not primitive technology. This was not outdated weaponry. This was the reason the enemy feared humanity. Admiral Krelzan's dilemma. On the Council's flagship, Admiral Krelzan was shaking. He had spent his life believing humans were weak, a lesser species, only surviving because of their reckless bravery and stubbornness. But now, watching as their forgotten fleet tore apart an enemy the Council had never even encountered before, he understood the truth. Humanity was never weak. They were never helpless. They had simply been waiting for a reason to awaken. One of his officers turned to him. Admiral, what are your orders? Krelzan didn't answer immediately. A part of him wanted to retreat, to let humanity fight its own war. But another part of him felt something else. Respect. For the first time in galactic history, he saw humanity as an equal. He clenched his fists. All ships, assist the human fleet. His officers froze. But sir, that's against. Krelzan's eyes burned with determination. This is no longer about politics. This is about survival. The war begins. As the Council warships turned their weapons toward the enemy, Elias stood in the celestial eye, staring at the unfolding battle. The ancient human fleet had fully awakened. Their power was far beyond anything he could have imagined. But now, the real war had begun. And this was only the first battle. Elias took a deep breath. This is what they were made for, he whispered. The legacy of humanity's ancestors was no longer forgotten. It was here. And it was unstoppable. Humanity's forgotten might. The battlefield was no longer a battle. It was a massacre. The black warships of the unknown enemy had arrived in hundreds, moving like a shadow of death across the void. Their weapons were unnatural, their movements eerily precise. It was as if they weren't just piloted, they were alive. But for all their strength, for all their numbers, they were losing. The ancient human fleet, once considered a relic of the past, was unstoppable. The machines of war. Elias stood in the celestial eye, his heart pounding as the battle unfolded before him. The warships of his long-forgotten ancestors moved in perfect unison, shifting and adapting without hesitation. Unlike the enemy's ships, these human-made war machines weren't just following commands. They were thinking, learning. Each shot fired by the enemy was countered instantly, Each tactic used was analyzed and exploited. The longer the battle raged, the more the ancient fleet understood its enemy. Elias's voice was barely a whisper. "They're evolving." Commander Vextal turned to him, his reptilian face filled with disbelief. "Evolving?" Elias nodded, his hands shaking as he studied the data. "These warships, they aren't just old relics. They were designed to adapt, to learn from their enemies in real time." Vextal's throat tightened. "Then that means—" Elias's eyes widened. "It means the longer this battle lasts, the stronger they get. The enemy's last stand." Across the battlefield, the black warships of the enemy were being torn apart. One by one, their shields failed, their weapons malfunctioned, their tactics collapsed. The Council fleet, which had once tried to destroy the human warships, now fought alongside them. Admiral Krelzen had committed his forces to the fight, but deep down, he knew the truth. They weren't winning this battle. The ancient human fleet was, and it wasn't just winning, it was dominating. Krelzen watched as his own warships struggled, barely able to keep up with the pace of combat. Meanwhile, the ancient human fleet moved like gods of war, obliterating anything in their path with terrifying efficiency. A chilling thought crept into his mind. What if this fleet had been awake all this time? Would the Galactic Council have ever been able to stand against it? Would the entire galaxy have already been under humanity's control? And then, something changed. The enemy's secret weapon. The black warships of the enemy began to retreat. Their formations broke apart, their ships falling back into deep space. It seemed like they were running for their lives. Sarnak sneered. "That's right. Run, you cowards." But Elias's heart sank. Something wasn't right. He studied the readings, scanning for anomalies. And then he saw it. A massive energy spike, far beyond anything he had seen before. The retreating enemy ships weren't fleeing. They were repositioning. For something bigger. "No," Elias shouted. "They're not running. There." Before he could finish, a black void opened in the distance. From its depths, something colossal emerged. A warship unlike any before it. A behemoth of metal and energy, dwarfing everything else on the battlefield. A single ship, but as large as an entire fleet. The monitors screamed with error warnings. The celestial eye systems malfunctioned instantly just from the sheer presence of this monstrosity. Elias froze in horror. "That's not just a warship." Vextal's voice was hollow. "Then what is it?" Elias swallowed hard. "That's their flagship. The warship that shouldn't exist." The enemy flagship pulsed with a dark, eerie glow, its surface shifting like a living organism. The data on Elias's screen flickered wildly, unable to analyze its composition. It was made of something unknown. Something not metal, not organic, not machine. Sarnak's arrogance vanished. What the hell is that thing?" Then, it spoke. A voice echoed across the entire battlefield, not through comms, but directly into their minds. "We were here before you." Elias's hands clenched into fists. No, that's impossible." The voice laughed. "You think you are the first. You think you are the strongest. We destroyed your kind once before. We will do so again." Elias's blood ran ice cold. This wasn't just an enemy. This was a species that had fought humanity before. The final revelation. Elias turned to Vextal. His voice was shaking. "This fleet wasn't built for a war that never happened." Vextal frowned. "What?" Elias inhaled sharply. "It was built for a war that was lost." The realization hit like a shockwave. The ancient fleet wasn't waiting for an attack that never came. It was built by the last survivors of a war humanity had already fought and lost. This enemy wasn't new. It was the reason the fleet had been hidden away. It was the reason why no records existed. Because humanity had already fought this war before, and they had failed. The battlefield changes. The enemy flagship charged its main weapon, the energy reading surpassing anything ever recorded. One shot. That's all it would take. Elias turned back toward the fleet. They have to adapt. They have to. Before he could finish, the ancient warships began moving. Not to attack. Not to flee. But to protect. They shifted into a defensive formation, their shields expanding, overlapping. And then they spoke. For the first time, the warships sent out a message. A single, powerful transmission. We remember. Elias's breath hitched. These weren't just warships. They were memories. They carried the last echoes of humanity's greatest warriors. And now they had one last battle to fight. The enemy flagship fired. A black wave of destruction surged forward, a weapon powerful enough to wipe out an entire planet. And yet, the ancient fleet moved in front of it. The shields pulsed. The energy blast collided, and space erupted in light. Elias shielded his eyes. When the light faded, his jaw dropped. The fleet had survived. The enemy's most powerful weapon had failed. For the first time in history, the enemy was afraid. The final battle begins. Elias took a deep breath. This is it, he whispered. The true war had begun. And this time, humanity would not lose. The truth unfolds. The battlefield was no longer a chaotic mess of explosions. It had transformed into a coliseum of war, where the past and present clashed in a battle older than time itself. The ancient human fleet stood in perfect formation, their glowing shields radiating energy that pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, unbroken, alive. The enemy flagship, a monstrous void-colored behemoth, hovered like a harbinger of doom, its sheer presence bending space around it. And Elias finally understood. This was not just another battle. This was the second round of a war that had never truly ended. The forgotten enemy. Inside the celestial eye, Commander Vextal turned toward Elias, his reptilian face tight with worry. Dr. Carter, explain yourself. What do you mean humanity has fought them before? Elias's hands trembled as he scrolled through the decrypted files from the ancient warships. He barely managed to find a single intact message. A transmission recorded thousands of years ago by one of the fleet's last surviving commanders. He activated the recording. A holographic figure flickered into existence, a battle-worn human soldier, his eyes filled with sorrow. His armor was scorched, his face covered in old scars. If anyone is hearing this, it means we failed. Silence filled the bridge. Elias's throat went dry. Failed. The recording continued. We called them the Voidborn, a species not of flesh, nor of machine. Something else, something wrong. We thought we could fight them. We thought we were strong, but they were never fighting to win. Elias narrowed his eyes. Then what were they fighting for? The holographic commander's gaze darkened. They were fighting to erase us. A deep, sickening silence filled the room. Vextal gritted his teeth. You're saying these things don't conquer. They don't enslave. Elias nodded, his stomach twisting. They don't want to rule. He looked at the battlefield, where the Voidborn warships moved in unnatural synchronization. They want to erase every trace that we ever existed. The final betrayal. Across the battlefield, the Galactic Council's remaining warships struggled to hold formation. Admiral Krelzan clenched his fists as his flagship's shields flickered under the relentless Voidborn assault. One of his officers turned to him, his voice frantic. Admiral, we can't hold much longer. The Council forces are in disarray. Krelzan's mind raced. In his heart, he had already accepted the truth. Humanity was their only hope. Their fleet, old yet unstoppable, was the only thing standing between survival and extinction. But then, a new transmission came through. Not from the humans, not from the Voidborn, but from the Galactic High Council itself. A cold, emotionless voice filled the bridge. Admiral Krelzan, Disengage immediately. Cease hostilities with the Voidborn. This is an order. Krellzan's blood ran cold. What? The voice repeated itself. The High Council has decided. We will negotiate with the Voidborn. The bridge officers froze in disbelief. Negotiate. With a species that only knew annihilation. The horror in Krellzan's eyes was replaced by fury. The cowards, he spat. He understood immediately. The Council wasn't planning to fight. They were planning to surrender. The true purpose of the ancient fleet. Elias was still staring at the old transmission, reading every word, every warning left behind by the past. And then he found it. The last log of the fleet's eye. One final command, buried deep within its systems. It read, "If the day comes when the galaxy betrays its own, we will not fight for them. We will fight for humanity. Only humanity." Elias's breath caught in his throat. That was it. That was the truth behind the fleet's awakening. This wasn't just about war. This was about choosing sides, and the ancient fleet had already chosen. The final decision. A new transmission suddenly boomed across all frequencies. A void-born entity, its voice a chorus of whispers and echoes, spoke. "Surrender, cease resistance, and we will erase you quickly. Continue, and you will suffer." Elias turned to Vextal. "They're offering a choice." Vextal's hands curled into fists. "It's not a choice. It's death. Either way." The bridge shook violently as another wave of enemy fire struck their shields. The Voidborn weren't bluffing. They were ready to wipe everything out. Sarnak's smugness had long disappeared. His voice was now filled with fear. "This is it, isn't it? The end of the war. The end of all of us." Elias exhaled. "No, not yet." He turned toward the ancient fleet, toward humanity's last army. And then he spoke. "This is Dr. Elias Carter. Can you hear me?" For a moment, there was silence. Then, a deep metallic voice filled the comms. "We hear you." Elias clenched his fists. "You were built for this war. You were built to fight them." "Correct." Elias took a step forward. "Then you know what's coming. You know what they want." The ancient fleet's AI paused. Then it spoke the words that sent chills down every spine. "We remember." Elias closed his eyes. That was all he needed. The final order. The Galactic Council had chosen surrender. The Voidborn had chosen annihilation. But humanity had chosen to fight. Elias opened his eyes and gave the command. "Then let's finish what we started." Across the battlefield, the ancient human warships roared to life, their energy cores surging to maximum power. For the first time, the entire fleet spoke in unison. "Primarily data et pi ERACE the VORN. The golden light of their weapons burned brighter than stars. The Voidborn flagship shifted uneasily. It had never known fear. Until now, the final battle had begun. The return of the human superpower. The battlefield was on fire, not with flames, but with the raw energy of war. The ancient human fleet had fully awakened. Their golden shields flared against the darkness, and their weapons, built in an age long forgotten, glowed with the wrath of a species that refused to die. On the other side, the Voidborn flagship, a monstrous warship large enough to eclipse entire planets, hovered like a god of destruction. The Galactic Council had chosen cowardice. The Voidborn had chosen extermination. But humanity had chosen war. The last stand of the Galactic Council. Admiral Krellzan gritted his teeth as his flagship's hull trembled. The Council's remaining warships were barely holding together. The betrayal from the High Council still burned in his mind. They were willing to surrender. They were willing to let the Voidborn erase them, as if their entire civilization meant nothing. Krellzan turned to his bridge crew, his reptilian eyes burning with fury. "Open a channel to all remaining Council warships." An officer hesitated. "Sir, the High Council has ordered." Krellzan slammed his fist into the console. The High Council is full of cowards. We follow a new order now. The officer swallowed hard and opened the channel. Across the battered council fleet, Krellzan's voice boomed through the comms. This is Admiral Krellzan. If you believe in the High Council's surrender, then shut down your weapons and die like dogs. He paused, letting his words sink in. But if you still have the spirit to fight, if you still have the will to live, then follow the humans. We stand with them. A heavy silence followed. Then, one by one, the remaining Council warships turned, their weapons powered up, their shields reformed, and for the first time in history, the Galactic Council fought under human command. The wrath of the Voidborn. The Voidborn flagship finally moved. Its entire surface shifted and twisted, forming a weapon unlike anything ever seen. A massive energy cannon, stretching across the entire length of the ship, charged with an unnatural force. A voice echoed through the battlefield. This was inevitable. You delay the end, but you will not escape it. The cannon fired. A black beam surged forward, warping space around it. It was not an explosion. It was erasure. Anything caught in its path would be removed from existence itself. The shield of humanity. The ancient human fleet reacted instantly. Without hesitation, 12 massive warships moved forward, positioning themselves directly in the path of the attack. Elias's heart stopped. No. Before he could finish, the beam struck. The first warship shattered. The second disintegrated. The third buckled under the force. But the rest, the remaining 9 warships absorbed the attack. Not blocking, not resisting. They consumed it. The last command. The ancient warships, now glowing with absorbed Voidborn energy, suddenly linked together, forming an impossible structure. A massive ring of golden fire formed in the sky, each warship serving as a piece of a superweapon that had never been used before. Elias stared in shock as his screen displayed the weapon's name, a name that had been lost to history. The Crucible. It wasn't just a cannon. It was the final creation of humanity's first empire, the weapon that was meant to end the Voidborn forever. A voice from the fleet boomed across the battlefield. Ingenuity hivar otocol, gene Isaias. The ring expanded, its energy gathering. The darkness of space was replaced with a glow as bright as a newborn sun. The Voidborn screeched, their fleet suddenly scrambling in every direction. For the first time, they were afraid. They had erased humanity before. But now, humanity had learned how to erase them. The final shot. The Voidborn flagship turned, trying to escape, trying to flee. The voice of the ancient fleet spoke one last time. We remember. And then, they fired. A beam of golden fire erupted from the crucible. It moved faster than light. It tore through the Voidborn flagship, piercing its very essence. A horrific scream echoed through the galaxy. An inhuman, distorted sound of a species being erased. The flagship imploded, folding into itself. The remaining Voidborn ships faltered, their bodies collapsing as if their very existence was being undone. Then, silence. The battlefield was empty. The war was over. The return of the forgotten fleet. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His hand shook as he gripped the console. They had won. Humanity had won. But before he could celebrate, a soft beeping filled his screen. A final message from the ancient fleet. Elias frowned. What's this? The words on the screen sent a chill down his spine. Mission complete. Returning to origin. Elias's eyes widened. The fleet is leaving. Outside, the warships of the ancient fleet shifted once more. Their golden light flickered as their engines powered up. They had done their duty. They had fulfilled their final command. Now, they were returning home. But where was home? Elias turned to Vextal. We need to follow them. The auxiliary commander hesitated, then nodded. A few Council warships, still processing everything that had happened, joined them. As the ancient fleet moved through space, Elias watched the navigation data closely. The warships were headed toward a system far beyond the known galaxy, a place uncharted, unexplored, a place no human had seen in over 10,000 years, the Lost World. Hours later, as they neared the destination, Elias felt his heart stop. There, hidden beyond the reach of modern maps, was a planet, a world covered in massive skyscrapers, ancient cities buried beneath time. And at the heart of it, a single, massive structure, an old Earth flag still waving at its peak, humanity's first home among the stars. Vextal whispered in awe, "What is this place?" Elias exhaled. "This is where they came from. This is the first empire." The fleet descended toward the surface. A door, untouched for thousands of years, slowly opened, and for the first time in history, humanity was returning home. Epilogue. The age of humanity begins again. The war was over, but the discovery of the first empire changed everything. Humanity was no longer a young race. They were a lost empire, rediscovered. And now, the galaxy would learn what that meant, because this time, humanity was here to stay.